welcome everybody. And it's really nice to kind of see you, but anyway, so we are all now used to this kind of communication, so it's not a problem. So my name is Aarni Heiskanen. I'm a construction innovation agent based in Helsinki, Finland, and my company AEC Business helps built environment companies and organizations in technology, strategy, innovation and communication projects. And in this presentation, I'll focus on digital technologies and their applications in construction. I'll talk about why the construction industry is trying and forced to change, how it's planning to do it, and what's happening now and in the near future in terms of technology. Well, I started my career in the 1970s. Actually, I was a student of architecture at the Helsinki University of Technology in 1977. And this was my first computer interface. It was a teletype printer, which didn't have any monitor or anything like that. It was, I would call it paper-aided computing. So everything, all the communication with the computer happened through the keyboard and a paper roll. And all the programs had to be stored on a paper tape or punched cards. So this was technology in the late 70s. And also during the same time, I was working on a construction site in the summer, learning what construction actually meant in practice. And it's funny to think that this picture is from 2020. It's funny to think that even today, the construction looks pretty much the same as it did in the late 70s. But the computers look totally different. The technologies are totally different. So perhaps it's an overstatement, but it looks like the construction technology and the tools and the skills I had in the late 70s would still go a long way in today's construction. Our industry is great, I must say. It can create awesome results, such as this library in Helsinki, but also it's full of surprises. So in this case, it was a pleasant surprise that it became so popular in a short time. But otherwise, construction is unfortunately full of risk, and it's a lot of manual work. It's not systematized, and so on. So it's full of surprises, and I'm not sure if everybody would like to work in a company that's full of surprises all the time. And this is one of the one indication of that. If you think about, let's say, a factory, and you would plan your production 1 week ahead, 2 months ahead, or 3 months ahead, this wouldn't be acceptable. This is real data from real projects. So in 1 week ahead planning, 74% of the schedule of the work is on schedule. 2 months ahead, 5%. 3 months ahead, none. So this is a problem. And this is another illustration from Aalto University that I've helped recently. And they are doing construction monitoring using IoT, video equipment, and so on. So this is data-based results, not just opinions or surveys. And it shows, the diagram on the left shows that if you consider 10 minutes of uninterrupted work as value adding, of the time a construction worker is on the site, only 34% of that time that he's on the site or she's on the site is productive or value adding. And the diagram on the right shows that different carpenters, plumbers, and so on, how much time they spend overall in the correct location, and the blue bar is on the left is about where they were supposed to be. So if they were supposed to be in that location that time, that's the blue bar. So it shows that most often, or in 50% of the cases, they are not where they're supposed to be. So this is really a big problem in construction. And what is the industry doing about all this? There are, I mentioned three things that I find very interesting and promising. Now, lean construction, of course, the idea is the elimination of waste, how to eliminate waste in the processes. And this is a typical tact planning schedule. As you can see, it's not a Gantt chart with long bars. Instead, it is consists of short batches of work. So it's very, very controlled, and the results are really promising. Tact planning can reduce construction time in certain cases more than 50% without any technology. And the second thing I want to mention that's also changing the industry is integrated project deliveries, how to manage complexity and share risk and reward. And this has been very promising in larger projects. For example, in Finland, very much used in infrastructure construction, but also the same practices are now being implemented in even smaller, for example, residential construction. And finally, industrialized construction. It means that you are trying to reduce variability. So the variability is the source of all evils, as one professor said in this industry. So the idea is to systematize processes, production, and get better control over the construction projects and construction sites. So how does technology fit in to all this? I would say that technology is an enabler, but also a necessary part of all this change that's taking place. And if you're, let's say, a construction company or a design firm, engineering firm, and you're thinking where to put your technology investment, euros or dollars in the future, you might consider this kind of idea that there are certain business necessities on the bottom that you have to invest in. For example, engineers and architects definitely need BIM tools nowadays. So that's a necessity. But also, what kind of process productivity improvements you can gain with technology? What kind of risk mitigation can you achieve? Because risk is a really big question in construction. And how can you improve worker well-being? And what are those kind of investments that you can do? And on top, there are information value add investments, something that information creates added value. For example, we know that many companies are now hiring data analysts, for example. So that's a sign of that. And also all sorts of let's say open source information, open data that's available could add value to your processes. And finally, there are potential future wins. You are not certain if they will pay off in the short term and even in the long term, but you must consider those as well. And this is something that construction industry companies are often reluctant to do. And maybe that's why, because they might be afraid of taking risk in that, even in added risk in technology. And by the way, one construction company CEO was asked recently why the industry is so reluctant to invest in new technologies. And he said that we know the risks of traditional construction, but the risk of implementing new technologies is unknown to us, and that's why we're really careful about it. I'm not sure if that's a good answer or not, but anyway, that's an excuse perhaps. So I have a blog and podcast, and now also a TV channel that I have, and through those channels, and I've been involved in many projects, and also I've interviewed hundreds of people in this industry, and based on those interviews and the insight from our clients also, I'm now presenting some ideas. This is not an exhaustive presentation of what's available, what will be available, but we are also already having so much technology that we can use that there are no excuses to neglect them. So this diagram will make sense in a few in a short moment, but on bottom of this diagram we are looking at let's say a typical construction project. I call the first phase development, then design, construction, operation comes after construction, and at the bottom we have the data stream. So our industry and the built environment in general creates a huge amounts of data, and the amount is increasing as we speak. So there are geographical data, demographical data, there are models, BIM models, transactions, product data, planning data, sensors, streaming video, and so on and so on. So you know that there's a lot of data available and created every minute. But to make that data useful, we need certain structures, certain ontologies, data standards, preferably open data standards, and also sometimes we need to use proprietary formats. But anyway, we need something to make the data machine readable. And then we have a ton of technologies, starting from very old GIS, BIM, CAD, VR, and then VR, MR, and so on, AR, machine learning, cloud computing, blockchain, LiDAR, robotics, 3D printing, IoT, mobile computing, reality capture, drones, and so on, and 5G is coming right now. So there are lots of technologies that can utilize the data. If I start the process, looking at the process from the development phase, we have now at our disposal a lot of information data that we didn't have previously. So we can very much base our decisions on facts and data, and we can model those, use that data to define our requirements for the project. I'm talking about especially about clients in this case and investors. So we can call it the requirements model. And then when we move to the design phase, architects and engineers have already digitalized their processes. Instead of just mimicking paper-based processes as we used to do in the 80s, we are now using computers for design automation, parametric design, and so on. So, and model-based collaboration is possible, as is also model-based cost calculation, for example. So the design phase is already pretty much digitalized, but we're still transferring data on paper in many cases. So there's still potential to use the models for collaboration, for all sorts of calculations. And of course, now we have immersive customer involvement possible with VR, AR technologies. And from design is of course one part of design is permissioning, getting building permits, and we already have now cities, for example, in Finland, a couple of cities who are accepting models and using model checkers to check the compliancy of the models. And that's also one thing to do, because models are so complex nowadays that it's really time consuming trying to figure out everything manually. So that's a very promising technology that we're seeing. And model-based bidding, that's still pretty new idea, but already we have companies who accept models. Contractors can use them for bidding, and the very interesting application of the models is project simulation. So we have now startups that provide simulation where contractors can, for example, see how having one tower crane or two tower cranes can impact the project schedule and the use of resources and so on. So you can simulate your construction projects before you have actually entered the lot even. So these, of course, these technologies very well support alliancing and IPD collaborative project models, because they provide a really good environment for the stakeholders to collaborate, and also provide a way to standardize processes and interactions. When we move to construction, to the construction site, the actual construction and the whole supply chain will benefit immensely from digitalization. For example, factories or providers can now use models and data from models for automated fabrication of steel rebar, for example. So and of course use those for panel-based construction for concrete panel production, and so on. So the models work also for manufacturing. Then we have, let's say, we have sensors on construction sites, cameras, wearables, and so on, which provide information about what's happening, who's where, location and sensor-based health and safety information, and also tell about the phase or readiness of construction automatically. We have seen cameras used, for example, in interior construction, where you just walk around the construction site and the AI assisted system will tell you what is the readiness of certain, let's say, rooms, kitchens, bathrooms, and so on, quite accurately. So it saves a lot of time and makes this information available to everybody. We call this situational awareness nowadays. So everybody knows what's happened on the construction site, what's going to happen, and what will happen in the future, and not just on the construction site, but also in manufacturing, in logistics, and so on. So we have a real-time picture of the construction site all the time at our disposal. Of course, robots are really interesting, but I would imagine that robotic construction will be feasible, for example, in rebar binding, and also data collection, just like drones are used nowadays. But I'm not sure that we will be seeing robots actually doing construction in replacing manual work anytime soon. And also, of course, all this helps in proactive business and risk management on the construction side, which is one of the key problems in construction, as we saw. And finally, of course, the construction creates a lot of data that can be passed on to operations and maintenance, but there is still, I think, a gap in that sense. And if you look at the whole picture, it's like this. This is the idea that I was trying to present to you, so that we already have a lot of technologies, a lot of applications, and all that I've mentioned here is already in use in some cases, of course, pilot projects and so on. But it's not that nothing's happening really. And of course, we know that there are several startups involved in all this. But the question I have to startups is that maybe you should also be aware of what others are doing and not try to reinvent the wheel every time. So it's I see a lot of quite similar applications popping up and hoping to be the next big thing. But also I would say that if you're developing for the industry, you should also understand the logic. I'm not saying that accept the logic, business logic and the practices, but look into the future a little bit and try to figure out how it could be better for people, businesses, and the environment in the future. That's a kind of technology that we will need. And finally, here are my here's my contact information. I have a blog at aec-business.com. I have maybe over almost 700 posts there, so it's a good source of information about what I was talking here about. And also AEC Tech TV is now, we've launched it in September. We're trying to feature interesting people, companies, startups, developers, innovators, and also share some news of the industry. So that's my very let's say concise presentation of the construction technology sector or scape that I see nowadays. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.